Okay, so similar to the chemistry unit, we're going to start out talking about the basic unit of this science. The basic unit of chemistry is the atom. The basic unit of biology is the cell. Okay, so we're going to talk about cells. Okay, we're going to talk about living organisms, and we're going to hopefully get into microscopy here before the period ends. So here's what we need to talk about first. For something to be considered alive, what does it have to do or have? What are some things that something to be considered alive would do? Is that move? Okay, could be movement, although trees don't move. I mean, in the Lord of the Rings they do, but yeah. I mean, they do have some ability to flex, for sure.
How does it have a nucleus?
Okay, not everything that's alive actually has a nucleus. Bacteria, even though they're a cell, don't actually have a nucleus. So it's a good idea. Eukaryotic organisms all do. So a lot of organisms on Earth do have a nucleus. Okay? Okay, exchange gases. Yeah, that would definitely be one. Okay, bring in oxygen, release carbon dioxide, or if they're a plant, the reverse, because it's photosynthesis. Okay, what else? Why do we breathe in one gas and exchange another?
I was thinking like energy.
Yeah, exactly, because we're making energy. That's why the gases change. Okay, we need oxygen to burn the fuel, the food that we eat. Okay, so consume energy. Okay, exchange gases. If you consume energy, what do you probably produce? Waste. Okay, got to be able to produce waste. And usually this is the first one. What's the other thing all organisms have to be able to do? Reproduce. Yeah. Okay. So I would say, yeah, those are kind of the four. There's a fifth, though. There's a fifth thing. All organisms, all living organisms, okay, have these. What are they? Cells. Okay? All living organisms are made of cells. Here's why that's important. If we just say exchange gases, consume energy, okay, reproduce, produce waste, fire is a living organism. Fire does all of those things. Is fire alive? Well, if you talk to a fire jumper, they tell you it sure acts like it. Okay, it's really scary if you're fighting a forest fire. They say it acts like it has a mind. Okay, but it doesn't. It's just a chemical reaction. But it does those four things that living things do. But it's not made of cells. That's the key thing. Okay, for something to be considered a truly living organism, it must be made of cells. Okay, now, that presents us with one organism, and I'm going to use that term loosely when applied to it, that we encounter, that's been a big part of your life, okay, that does not fit that bill. What organism am I thinking of?
Bacteria?
Wasn't thinking of bacteria, but they are made of cells. So that's why I wasn't thinking of it. It's a good guess. Like bacteria, they make you sick. What else other than a bacteria can make you sick? Cost you 2 years of your social development, people.
Viruses?
Viruses, yeah, like COVID. Okay? Viruses are not cells. Okay? A virus is nothing more than a strand of genetic material encased in some kind of protein shell. A virus does not consume food for energy. It does not exchange gases. It does not produce waste. And in fact, it cannot reproduce on its own. Okay? It doesn't do any of the four things that qualify you to be a living organism. Fire is more of a living organism than a virus is. Okay? So how does a virus make you so sick? How many people know how a virus works? Okay? All right, so here's how a virus works. Okay? This little infectious particle, because I'm not going to say it's a living thing, okay? It's an infectious particle, gets into your body. It'll come into contact with one of your cells. Because it's made of materials that are like what your cells are made of, okay, it is allowed to kind of stick to the outside of the cell. While it's stuck there, it'll dissolve or put a hole in the cell membrane. And its genetic material will go into your cell. Now your cell is very picky about genetic material. It doesn't want it floating around where it can get damaged. So it'll draw it into the nucleus where all of your genetic material is. Okay? So inside the nucleus, you've got all of your DNA, the code to make you. Okay? What we would plug into a cloning machine to make another of you if we had one. Okay? Now, what your cell does, okay, is it says, we got this piece of DNA here. It's got to go somewhere. It doesn't know exactly where to put it, but it'll find a spot for it. And what it'll do is it'll take one of your strands of DNA and it'll cut it. Okay? It'll split it and it'll splice this piece. It'll splice this piece in. All right, so now, is your DNA altered? For that cell, not for every cell in your body. You're not going to become a mutant. Okay? But now, your cell's got a problem. Because whatever it just took out might have been the instructions for making something important. Let's just say that section of the DNA was the instructions for making insulin, okay, which is a hormone that your pancreas makes and it helps you to absorb sugars from your blood. So your cell goes, hey, we need some insulin. It sends a message to the nucleus saying, can you copy that part of the DNA, send it out and make some insulin for us? Okay, so your nucleus copies the part of the DNA where the code for insulin is supposed to be. What's in its place? The virus's DNA. So now that DNA gets sent out, what gets produced? A virus. Okay? It hijacks your cellular machinery. Okay? It literally hijacks it. Instead of making it do what it's supposed to do, it makes it do something else. That something else is make viruses. Here's the problem. The cell didn't get what it wanted. And it's like, hey, want to talk to your manager. Okay? I wanted insulin. I didn't get any. And they go full Karen, okay, and they are saying, I want my insulin. So then the nucleus goes, oh, don't worry, okay, we'll get it done. It copies it again, sends it out. What does it make? Well, now the Karen just gets more and more irate, okay, and keeps demanding more and more of what it wanted. What keeps getting made?
Viruses.
Right. Pretty soon the cell is full with viruses and it just pops. Okay. Now, one virus has turned into 500, maybe 1,000. All it takes is for a couple of those viruses to attach to another cell. Each one of them makes between 500 and 1,000 viruses. Even if only a couple of them are successful in infecting a cell, you can see how it would become kind of an exponential rate of growth pretty quickly. Okay? This is why, like, you know, you're getting ready to go to bed and you're like, oh man, my throat's kind of scratchy. I hope I'm not getting sick. And then you wake up in the morning and think, I'm going to have to get better to die. Okay? Because I'm so sick. Well, all night long, that's what the virus has been doing. It's been making copies of itself and copies of itself and copies of itself. Okay? What makes you sick from a virus is that your cell, your body, kills your own cells to kill the virus. Viruses are tiny. Your body can't go out and find the thousands of viruses that are floating around in it. And that's pointless anyway. Most viruses never end up attaching to a cell and infecting it. The best bet is to kill the cells that are actively making viruses. That's why you get so weak. Okay, why a virus just drains you. Okay, you just get so weak because your body's destroying itself to get rid of the virus. Okay, that's why a virus like HIV, for example, is so insidious. Okay, it infects the cells that come around to kill it. Okay, it infects your immune system cells. Okay, so it's got an immune system cell making more HIV viruses. Another immune cell comes over to kill it, and now they're both infected. Okay, that's why it's such a big problem. Okay? Making some sense? So a virus isn't technically a living thing. It doesn't do any of the things a living thing does, and it's not made of cells. Okay? All right. Now, do you guys remember from like grade 9 going over the parts of the cell and what they do? We're going to do that again in a little bit more detail, not today, okay, but we will. Okay, so let's talk cell theory. We had an atomic theory. The atomic theory had 4 points. Good news, cell theory only has 3. Okay, simply. So, the first point of the cell theory is just like the first point of the atomic theory. All living things are made of cells. Okay? Don't say all things. That isn't true. All living things are made of cells. Okay, so some examples here. Okay, obviously a cactus is a multicellular organism that's made of billions of cells. Okay, you've also got your like actinopods here. They make kind of a silicate, almost like glass shell. Okay, that goes around them, and bits of their cytoplasm can stick out through the holes. That's how they feed. Okay, or you could have something a little closer to home, like a paramecium. Okay, we find those in like scummy water. Okay, like in a slough or something. There'll be lots of those. Okay, that's why you shouldn't drink it. But yeah, there'll be lots of those single-celled organisms swimming around along with other things like amoebas and stuff like that. Okay? All right, second point of the cell theory talks about what does a cell do? Put a star beside the second point. It is by far the most important of the 3 points. Okay, so the second point is the most important because we come back to it a lot. Okay, cells carry out those basic functions. You know, those things we were talking about that fire can do, okay, but it's not made of cells, so it's not a living organism. Okay, so that would be like it can consume food, it can produce energy, it produces waste, it exchanges gases. Okay, it carries out all of these processes necessary for the organism to live. It makes proteins. Okay, breaks down complex carbohydrates, all that kind of stuff. It does every little thing. If I took one single cell from your body and put it on a petri dish, okay, with some nutrient stuff, it would live. Okay, it can carry out all the basic functions that you can, but it can do it at a cellular level. Okay, so a cell can survive outside of the body for at least a while, okay, carrying out the basic functions of the organism. All right, third point. Cells come from the division of existing cells. There's no factory in your body that makes cells. Okay? Every cell that you have in your body came from the division of another cell. Okay? And that can be traced all the way back to the moment you were conceived. Okay? The moment you were conceived, a sperm carrying half of your genetic code met an egg carrying the other half of your genetic code. Okay? Those combine, they form a single cell called the zygote. That single cell has all the genetic information to build you. Okay? That cell divides over and over and over again. Right? And over the course of the next, 40 weeks, okay, that cell continues to divide, produce more and more cells. Those cells become specialized. They become your organs. They become your bones, okay, your muscles, all of that kind of stuff. Okay? It's a wondrous miracle, okay, that all of that stuff can happen. Right? And it all comes from one single cell. Okay? Sort of making sense? And if you think about it now, you have billions of cells in your body. They all came from that one cell, okay, the moment you were conceived. Okay? Incidentally, that is also the church's argument, okay, against things like abortion. Okay? The church's stance is that the potential for a person is present at the moment of conception, okay? Which scientifically is true. Okay? It's a valid scientific argument. All of the genetic material to make you is there at that moment. Okay? That means that at that moment, there is a life. Okay? That's the church's stance. So if you're wondering why the church has this stance, that's why. It's a scientific stance that says, we believe that at this moment, life begins. Okay? There's other schools of thought on when life begins. Some are like, well, when the blood begins to circulate, okay, things like that. For the Catholic Church, that moment is conception. That's its stance, and it's sticking to it. Okay? All right, now, for a cell to divide, it's not an easy process. Okay? It's a very complex process. You need to make exact copies of everything for that cell to survive. Okay? So the first thing that's got to be copied is all of that precious genetic information. Every time a cell divides, all of the DNA in that cell has to be exactly copied. If there's any mistake, the two cells will die. Okay? Because one could possibly have too much DNA, that can be a problem, and the other one will have too little, which is an obvious problem. Okay? So for example, there are some genetic disorders, okay, that involve having cells that have made a mistake very, very early on in development, okay, and that mistake has carried through for the rest of the development. Okay? Does anyone know anyone with Down syndrome? Okay? Down syndrome, okay, is trisomy 21. It means that every cell in that person's body has 3 copies of chromosome 21. You're only supposed to have 2. Okay? 2 copies of every chromosome. But very early on, in actually the production of either the egg or the sperm, a mistake was made. Okay? And that carried more DNA than it was supposed to. Okay? Now, does that have pretty far-reaching consequences for those people? It does, right? It affects emotional and mental development, even physical development. There's certain features and things like that. Oftentimes people with Down syndrome don't live quite as long. Okay? Parts of their body just don't work quite as well. Okay? It's pretty serious. Lots of genetic disorders that happen like that are so serious, a woman might not even know she's conceived. Okay? The fetus would die so early on because it just can't function. Okay? Some trisomies are like that. Okay? Other ones, the baby will be born and will unfortunately die shortly after. Okay? So having too little or too much genetic information is really, really bad. Okay? It can have very, very serious consequences. So this process of copying DNA has to be done perfectly. Okay? Can't make any mistakes. Okay, good with the 3 points? Okay, definitely know those 3 points. That could easily be a multiple choice question, right? Which of the following is not part of the cell theory? Okay, be 3 correct and 1 not. Okay. Now, when we did the development of the atomic theory, there were a lot more people involved. Okay, way more scientists and names to know. Okay, good news for you here, there are 4 names to know, and that's it. Okay, it went pretty fast. Okay? Now, the best one, in my opinion, because I'm a physics guy, is Hooke. Hooke is actually a physicist. Okay? And he was doing an experiment on what the effect of a series of lenses would be on the path of light passing through it. His idea was if he put lenses in a series, he might be able to find a way to magnify an image of something very small or something very far away. His idea basically gave birth to both the microscope and the telescope. Okay, set up differently, but having the same effect, magnifying something very small. So he built the first microscope. Okay, physics guy built the first microscope. Okay, and in order to test it, he needed something really small. So what he did, apparently he drank. I don't know, but he had a cork sitting around his office. Drinking at work is not a good idea, but apparently he had one. Okay? And so he sliced this cork really, really thin. What does cork come from? It comes from a tree. Cork is a piece of cork tree. Okay? So he cut it really, really thin and put it under the microscope. This is what he saw. What is he looking at? Yeah, they're dead, okay? He's just looking at the cell walls of all the plant cells that made up that cork tree where that piece of cork was cut from, okay? So he looked at this and he said, I'm looking at a bunch of empty little rooms, like cells in a prison. And the name cell was born. Okay, so now we call both prison cells and body cells, okay, cells. Okay. Now, he was wrong about them being empty. Right? I mean, the ones he looked at were empty because they were dead. Okay? But we know now that cells are vibrant and active and they've got all kinds of things going on. They're full of all kinds of other structures. He just happened to be looking at ones that were dead. Okay? So his first microscope magnified about 30 times. That's not a lot, but it was enough. Okay? Plant cells are generally fairly large, okay? So they were fairly easy for him to see. All right, so Hooke makes the first microscope. He is the first person to view cells. Okay? And then, as any good physicist would do, he handed off the most important tool ever made for biology and said, here you go. Okay? We're physics. We're awesome. Here, biology, have fun. We have this ongoing feud between all of us science teachers about which science is the best. Just so you know, it's physics. Okay? Physics discovered the atom, without which there would be no chemistry. And biology is just applied chemistry. So. Okay, development of the cell theory, number 2. Okay, the second person, Anton von Leeuwenhoek. Okay, he built a microscope as well. It was better, well, I wouldn't say better. It magnified more. It was much more difficult to use and thankfully didn't catch on. Okay, but difference for Leeuwenhoek is he was able to view living cells. He was able to view cells that were active and carrying on the basic life functions of an organism. Okay, so we looked at pond water. He saw all the little, amoeba and paramecia that were swimming around in there. Okay, blood cells. Pricked his finger. Okay, looked at the blood cells. Sperm cells from a bull. I don't want to think about what he had to do to get those. That was brave. Bulls are mean. Yeah, I don't know how he got those, but okay. Saw those. Okay, so we were seeing the little tails whipping back and forth and sperm swimming. Okay, and his microscope could magnify 300 times. It was 10 times better than the one Hooke built. Okay, problem is its design. It looks like a ping pong paddle. Okay, so what he would do is he would have a bright light source, sometimes maybe just a sunny window, okay, that would shine on his subject. So this little tab here would have the subject sitting on top of it, no slides. Okay, so there'd be the subject there, maybe like a small drop of water, and you have to hold it really, really still, okay, and let the light shine through it, then through the lens, and then the light would go like this. Right? The lens would diverge the light, and you'd go from having something really, really small to being able to see a cell greatly enlarged on a wall, on the other opposite wall. Okay, something like that. So it was good for magnifying, but it was really hard to use. It wasn't practical for anyone to use this on the regular. Okay, so Hooke, first person to see cells. Leeuwenhoek, first person to see living cells. Okay, the last two people worked together. Okay, the last two people are Schleiden and Schwann. Okay, two Swedish scientists who developed the cell theory. Okay, they are the two people who actually put it on paper. Oop, but it didn't go. Okay, there we go. Okay, so Matthias Schleiden and Theodor Schwann. All right, we'll leave it there for today, guys. Pick up with that and hopefully get into the lab to use the microscope scientifically tomorrow. Okay? A little bit near the end of class.